going to come across when you're searching for recipes is the use of baking soda in sourdough. So I want to teach you a little bit about it so that you can make sure and have the benefits of sourdough that you want. If you are just dabbling in sourdough or learning how to bake with sourdough because you love the flavor addition of sourdough, then this is not as important to you. And you can add baking soda whenever you want, as long as you know what it does. If you're like me and you want the nutritional benefits of having the flour fully fermented with both the yeast and the bacteria, and you want, the gluten breakdown and different things, the acids, then you may want to be much more choosy when you use baking soda. So let me tell you a little bit about how it works. Baking soda, this is what I keep mine in, is very alkaline. And sourdough starter, because of the byproducts of the fermentation from the yeast and the bacteria, it's very acidic. So there is a reaction when you put the two together. And of course, it doesn't take very much baking soda in a recipe to have a reaction. What happens is the alkalinity of the baking soda will neutralize the acids in the sourdough. So that's the first thing that will happen. And you will lose some of those really tangy, sour flavors that you get in sourdough goods. The second thing that happens, or I don't know which happens first, but the other thing that will happen with baking soda is it's going to select against the bacteria. So your yeast will survive baking soda being added into a recipe, but your lactobacillus is going to be either weakened or eliminated entirely, kind of depending, how much is used in the recipe and so on. And so for me personally, I don't use baking soda very often. I'll use it in my pancake recipe occasionally. I have a recipe for English muffins that I use it in occasionally, and crepes, but I don't use it very often because I really want the full fermentation. The recipes that I do choose to put baking soda in, I make sure all the wheat is fully fermented and the baking soda goes in right before it's being cooked. There are a lot of recipes where you can add the baking soda in the beginning of the recipe. So for instance, there's like banana bread recipes where you put sourdough starter. You're going to add flour that hasn't been fermented. You're going to add eggs and sugar and vanilla, and you're going to add your baking soda. And then you might let it set and continue to ferment. Some call for an hour, some have you let it sit for 12 hours. But after that baking soda has been added into the recipe, the fermentation is not going to be the same for all the flour and the other ingredients that you've added in as if you had not added the baking soda, because the bacteria will have been selected against with the baking soda. Now, if you're just adding the sourdough starter for a flavor enhancement or to make the banana bread, for instance, more moist and have a better texture, then that's perfectly fine. And you can put the baking soda in the recipe whenever you want. But if you're like me and you want that fermentation of the flour all the way through the recipe, you're going to want to look for recipes that add baking soda at the end. And if you want those healthy acids, you may choose to find recipes that don't add baking soda and you maintain those healthy acids and those benefits that you get from those acids. If baking soda is added to a bread dough, and some people do use baking soda in their bread, I personally don't consider that really a sourdough bread because you're kind of selecting against the bacteria and you're ending up with mostly just the yeast. But it's a perfectly fine way to make bread. It's just important to understand how it will affect your fermentation. I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you on the next segment.